What's up, guys? This is Max here with the Zero Lab. Today we're going to be taking a look at Snorlax Stall and what it might look like in the Temporal Forces format. Snorlax Stall is a deck that I personally have a lot of fun playing. It's a great alternate win condition deck that you just try to run your opponent out of resources. And yeah, it has a lot of good matchups right now, and it seems to get even better with the rotation here. It recently just placed second at the Vancouver Regionals, so let's take a look at that list and see what we lose and what we gain. So jumping into the list, pretty standard list overall, I'd say. There's a couple things that maybe stand out to me, but Snorlax Stall is a deck that the backbone of the deck is the 4 Snorlaxes with its block ability that prevent your opponent's active Pokemon from retreating, and so the idea behind the deck is just find something in your opponent's deck that can't attack or does little damage, and you just keep it stuck. And you have a lot of ways to keep it stuck, and then you have a lot of cards to run your opponent out of other resources. It's got the Rotom V and the Pidgeot V. The Rotom V is to just draw more cards every turn to try to find the pieces you need to keep that lock going. The Pidgeot V is just to stop yourself from decking out at the end of the game, because you'll be drawing through your deck pretty quickly and you want to be able to go infinite with your deck, and your opponent usually will not able to be doing that. We have one copy of Mimikyu V in this list. Just a good way to wall some other decks off. This particularly was very good against Rapid Strike when Rapid Strike was a meta deck in format, but there's some other decks that it is pretty strong against, such as Charizard. And then we have one copy of Carbonal V with that water energy. Just gives you an alternate line of play towards the end of games to try to just deck your opponent out at the end. It can also help like in a timed format. It allows you to finish games a couple turns sooner and maybe turn a would-be draw into a win. Looking at the supporter line in this deck, the meat and potatoes of this deck is just playing a ton of supporters. There's a lot of very powerful supporters that other decks can't really make room to fit, but this deck, yeah, it's pretty much all it wants to play. It's got 4 copies of Arven. Arven is the supporter you really want to see going first. This is a deck you choose to go second with, and so on your first turn, you're usually taking Battle VIP Pass and then either Forest Seal Stone or one of your other HP buffing tools. You just play the 1 copy of Battle VIP Pass, so starting an Arven makes it so you can just go ahead and search that out. It's pretty important to the deck to just in its consistency and getting set up. And on that note, Battle VIP Pass is one of the cards that this deck loses going into the next format. And that is definitely something to take note and how that can negatively impact the deck's ability to set up. In games in this format, when you're Arvening and your VIP pass is prized, for example, it definitely feels like your turn 1 is very weak and you're kind of just hoping to draw into your nest balls, draw into your Pokemon, and pray that you're able to get some more things down quickly. We have 3 copies of Penny here. Penny is one of the main ways that you can win against decks that do have an attacker that do little damage. You can just play Penny like every 2 or 3 turns, and you will like cycle these back with some of your other supporter cards and your pal pads. This particularly, for example, was very good into Miraidon. You would try to get a Flaffy or a Mareep stuck in the active, and then once it swung a few times, you would be able to Penny it and then send up the next Snorlax and just keep the lock going. Let's place 3 copies of Misfortune Sisters. Again, we're trying to keep things caught in the active spot that we don't want moving. And so Misfortune Sisters is very important to get rid of some of those switch cards, such as Escape Rope, Switch Cart, and Switch. And then it also helps in a lot of other matchups where your opponent has to use like trainer cards as resources to keep attacks going, such as Chi and Power, Goldengo. You like getting rid of a couple superior energy retrievals will quickly make it so your opponent is unable to attack anymore. This deck was very much unlocked with the release of the 151 set with Erica's Invitation. Erica's Invitation allows you to grab a basic Pokemon from your opponent's hand and put into the active spot. So before the opponent could just keep all the stuff that they didn't want in play, things that couldn't attack, just in their hand, Erica's allows you to grab that thing down and it will keep stuff stuck. It's just a really good tool, and kind of is the reason that this deck even became a thing. Play 2 copies of Boss's Orders, just one of our gusting options in this deck to keep things stuck in the active. We also play 4 copies of Counter Catcher, so we play 4 copies of gusting cards in total. I guess Erica's is also a pseudo gust, as we're bringing something else into the active. And then we can recycle these cards as well. So we have many outs to gusting our opponent's cards up. We play 2 copies of Iono. A lot of times, Iono is a very good card to play in the mid to late game. Once your opponent's taken several prizes, and their hand's very big. In this format, we have no way to take items out of your opponent's hand. And so if your opponent builds up a big hand and takes some knockouts, you can Iono, maybe they have some switch cards in their hand, send them to the bottom of their deck, and then we'll start playing our Misfortune Sisters again. And then we have 1 copy of Yakumo. Yakumo allows you to discard 1 special energy from each of your opponent's Pokemon. This is very strong into decks such as Mew VMAX and Rapid Strike. Both those decks are going away as they rotate next format. However, Lugia is still a very it looks like it's gonna be a very popular deck, and Arc decks are also hit pretty hard by Yakumo, and so could see I think I see some lists playing even 2 copies in this next format. We have 1 copy of Sydney in this list. Sydney is just a card that lets you discard special energy from your opponent's hand. This is also a card that we lose. It allows you to discard energies, tools, and stadiums. We lose Sydney, and so some matchups actually get worse, such as your last Tina matchup, which was already not very good, but with no way to get rid of their jet energies, it can be pretty difficult to win that matchup. Sydney is definitely a big loss for the deck. We have 1 copy of Avery. This is another supporter card that this deck loses. This card is very important in matchups that your opponent wants to or is able to just fill their bench with all attacking options, such as Miraidon or Gardevoir. And so playing a copy of Avery can allow you to clear their bench, so you could put something that they don't want onto the bench. Losing Avery means we have to maybe look at some other options. You could potentially play a copy of Collapse Stadium and a Vacuum in order to clear up 1 bench spot on your opponent's side of the field. Going on in the theme of supporter cards that we lose, here's 1 copy of Peonia. Peonia allows you to grab 3 of your prize cards and then put 3 prizes back from your hand into your prizes. We do lose this card, and this is a card that possibly might be the biggest hit in the deck. There's a lot of one-of cards in Snorlax Stall that are for very specific matchups, and as you don't play a way to take prizes, if you prize something super important, like say you're playing against Rapid Strike and you prize your Yakumo, you really need to be able to find that Yakumo in order to win the matchup, to get rid of some of your opponent's special energy. And so just finding these one-of cards that you need was super important in the deck. Some people are playing a combination of cards. Daisy's Help and Arc Phone. Daisy's Help allowing you to look at your prizes and put them back in any order, and then drawing 2 cards. And then it plays that with the combination of Arc Phone, where you get to look at the top card of your deck, and then you can switch it with 1 of your prizes. So that would be the other way post rotation to check to be able to take something out of your prizes. It's definitely a lot weaker than Peonia is, and it's a 2-card combo, so it's just harder to pull off. And there's always the awkward situation of maybe the card you drew off the top of your deck was like also an important card, and you really don't want to get rid of it. So definitely some clunkiness there. And so Peonia is a very, very, very big loss for this deck. And then finally, rounding out the supporters, we have Silene and Team Yelchir. This is another way that we can stay infinite with our deck in case your opponent maybe plays Spiritomb to shut off your Pidgeot V's ability. Or it's just another way to just cycle whatever your most powerful supporter in that matchup is. Let you, like, for example, keep cycling these Misfortune Sisters back in your deck to keep milling items. And a thing to note is we have the Team Yelchier that allows you to get a Pokemon back too. So you do play the one copy of Super Rod, but the Team Yelchier is another way to get Pokemon back. This deck plays 4 copies of Pokegear. Again, our supporters are the main thing that we'll be doing in this deck, is just playing a strong supporter. And so being able to find supporters is very important. And so 4 copies of Pokegear is what we got to play. We also play 4 Nest Ball. We just really want to get our Pokemon set up. You just want to get a board full of Snorlaxes and a Rotom down usually. And so playing as many outs to that as we can is important. As we mentioned before, we have the 4 copies of Counter Catcher, just our gusting option. 2 copies of Palpad. Palpad goes along with that Silene and Yelchier loop, so where you can Silene your Palpads back in the deck, you Palpad your Silene and Yelchier back in the deck, you can Yelchier your Silene back in the deck, or you can just Palpad 2 other like strong supporters in the matchup in, so it just goes along with that loop. We have 2 switch carts. Just nice to have a couple switching options in case we start something awkward, such as the Crabominable V or the Pidgey or the Rotom V. And then also it can be a way to just heal some damage off of our Pokemon to just live some extra attacks. As I said, we played the 1 copy of VIP, just trying to find it with our Arven turn 1. We play 1 copy of Heavy Ball. This is our other way to get a card out of the prizes, but it's limited to Pokemon. And so if we prize that Pidgeot V, we still have a way to find it so we can still go infinite with our deck. Play 1 copy of the Super Rod. You typically want to make your opponent go through as many Snorlaxes as possible, so once they've knocked a couple out, you can cycle them back in. And it's also very good for recycling our Mimikyu in matchups where it's very strong. We have 1 copy of Echoing Horn. Echoing Horn is another very big loss that this deck faces. It allows you to grab a basic Pokemon out of your opponent's discard and put it on the bench. And so without Echoing Horn, your opponent can now discard any Pokemon that they don't want in play. And while Stall does have an answer to that in a form of a different card, it's much weaker than Echoing Horn is. We have a couple HP buffing tools. We have 3 copies of Bravery Charm and 1 copy of Luxurious Cape. Bravery Charm just makes your 150 HP Snorlaxes go to 200, so that's pretty strong. It allows your Snorlaxes to eat a lot. 200 is a lot of HP, and so you just want your Snorlaxes as tanky as possible. Luxurious Cape does not rotate. However, I foresee this card not seeing nearly as much play as it's seeing now, as we can replace that with one of the A specs. We have a copy of Force Seal Stone. We play a couple Vs in the deck, especially that Pidgeot V, so we can, Nest Ball for Pidgeot V, and if we have the Seal Stone in hand, we can just get any card in our deck and then just immediately shuffle the Pidgeot back. This is playing 3 copies of Temple of Sinnoh. So this is mostly for, in this format, the Rapid Strike matchup, the Mew matchup, and the Giratina matchup. This could be very good next format too, with the popularity of Lugia. It doesn't do as much from stopping attacks, but it can turn off their jet energies, which could be pretty important. This list was playing 1 copy of Pokemon League Headquarters, which was a more niche card that some lists were playing, but most probably weren't. It makes your opponent's basic Pokemon, or I guess all Pokemon, but you don't attack. Attacks cost 1 more colorless energy, and so decks like Roaring Moon or Miraidon can just make it a little bit more awkward for them to get their attacks off. They have to spend more of their energy and use more resources on their Pokemon to be able to attack, and so you can slow them down a little bit that way. And then final note, the water energy goes with the Crabominable V, so we can trigger Avalanche, discard some cards from the top of our opponent's deck, but it can also be used as a retreat option for our Rotom, our Pidgeot, and our Mimikyu. And it's also recyclable with Super Rod, so it's kind of a pseudo like 3rd switch card too. Okay, now let's move on to this list did well in a recent online tournament with a couple hundred players. And so let's go through some of the new cards. As we can see, this is playing Chi-Yu EX instead of the Crabominable V. The Crabominable V rotates. Definitely a little bit of a downgrade. Crabominable was a V Pokemon, so that comboed with your Force Seal Stone. It also had it had 30 more HP for a total of 220, while Chi UEX only has 190, so it's a little bit weaker. However, it does have the option to use its second attack. We had no real way to use Chronobominable V's second attack and never really would want to. But this attack could be good in some scenarios, such as knocking out your opponent's Skwovet. Skwovet will be a much more annoying card for Snorlax Stall in this next format, as it makes it so your opponent has a way to infinite, and so you kind of have to have a way to deal with Skwovet, which I see seeing more play with the rise of Barrel Charizard. And so this attack that does 100 damage for 2 fire energies is a perfect way to deal with that Skwovet. We have 1 copy of Astral Radiance Mantine. Astral Radiance Mantine basically has Echoing Horn as an attack. And so this is our way to stop our opponent from just saying, I'm going to discard all of my support Pokemon that can't attack. If they do that, we can bring up our Mantine. However, it is an attack, and we do have to put it obviously in the active spot to use it. So when Mantine's in the active and it uses this attack, your opponent will be able to retreat, do whatever they want. It's a pretty low HP Pokemon, so it's an easy prize. But I think that this is definitely a win con for you in a lot of matchups, where you just need to get one of your opponent's Pokemon that is not very good for them into play. And so I think it makes sense to include this. I know not every list is, but I think for me personally, I think this is a must include, I think, in my opinion. Going forward, the biggest card that this deck gains is Airy. This is a supporter that reads, look at your opponent's hand. You can discard up to 2 item cards you find there. Yeah, again, Misfortune Sisters was such a strong card for this deck, but if your opponent got all of their switching options into their hand, there wasn't really anything you could do other than Iono them and then try to keep spamming the Misfortune Sisters. Aries a very, very powerful card, and even more than just hitting switching cards, you can hit rare candies, you can hit Ultra Balls, you can hit superior energy retrievals, super rods. There's many item cards in the format that your opponent really doesn't want to lose in this matchup. Just being able to have an easier way to get rid of your opponent's resources is very nice. And also, this card has some good synergy with Erica's Invitation. If you play Airy to get rid of some item cards and you see, oh, they have that Radiant Greninja in their hand, now you know you can play Airy or Erica's if your opponent does not shuffle their hand into their deck with Iono or Judge or something. And vice versa, if you play Erica's Invitation and you see, oh, my opponent has a couple switch cards in their hand, now you know Airy's a good play for the next turn. Moving on, this deck is playing 2 copies of Silene, which was definitely not the norm last format. However, with the loss of Peonia, we really, really, really don't want to prize our Silene, as it's our main way of cycling our Pal Pads back to keep spamming our best supporter. And so playing a second copy of a Silene gives you a little bit of prize protection. And then moving on, looking at the tools, we have a copy of Defiance Vest in there. Defiance Vest reads, when you're behind on prizes, the Pokemon this card's attached to takes 40 less damage from your opponent's attacks. This is a pretty good card, I think. This was definitely like a fringe card for me in my list from last format. It definitely helps some certain matchups, such as Lost Box. If your opponent gets a Cram into play, Cram's a pretty low maintenance attacker, and it can 2-shot your Snorlaxes. But with the Vest, it turns it from a 2-shot into a 3-shot, and that can be pretty important, because anytime something's a 2-shot, you can't really penny loop if they're 2-shotting all your Pokemon. But if they're 3-shotting your Pokemon, then you're able to keep a penny loop going pretty comfortably. We have that 1 copy of Hero's Cape. That's going to be our A-Spec for the deck. Definitely the most powerful A-Spec this deck can use. You don't really need the Prime Catcher. You already play so many gusting options, and so just having that free 100 HP is really, really nice. Not giving up the extra prize card that Luxurious Cape did is definitely an added bonus. And you can attach this to your Rotom, which I think is a very strong play. For example, in the Giratina matchup, something that they're looking to do pretty early on is boss KO your Rotom and just turn off your draw power. But this could stop them from doing it as early as they could before, as Lost Impact does 280, and the cape on your Rotom would give it 290. So that's a play to keep in mind. And then finally, we have a copy of Luminous Energy in here. So it's playing 1 Fire, 1 Luminous. That allows you to either use Chi-Yu's second attack to KO Squovitz like we were talking about, but playing the Luminous gives us the option of doing the same thing with the Mimikyu. So we can use the Mimikyu to take out Squovit or attack into other matchups. I think mostly it'll be for the Squovit. But also in some matchups, your opponent like isn't trying to bench too many things. They want to like keep their bench limited. Maybe they'll even just go with one active Pokemon. And so sometimes you might be able to just take like a knockout on their only Pokemon if they're unable to get anything out. Let's say you airy them and you get rid of all their nest balls in their hand and they just have a low HP Pokemon. You could maybe try to go in there with the Chi-Yu EX or the Mimikyu. And then I guess backtracking a little bit, this has a copy of Lost Vacuum. Lost Vacuum is I think it's pretty interesting. It's definitely a good card. Getting rid of, like, for example, your opponent's like maximum belt, so they're not one-shotting, like, so Charizard can't one-shot your Chi-Yu. That could be something that's relevant. I think if I was playing Vacuum, I would maybe think of, and I'm playing the Mantine too, I would think about adding a copy of Collapse Stadium, just to give us that option to clear off a bench if it's filled. Okay, and yeah, just going to some other options that the Snorlax Stall deck can play. You're already playing the Fire Energy, so you could choose to play a copy of Radiant Zard. Again, if your opponent's just trying to go like one Pokemon in the active spot, nothing else, and they've taken a few prize cards, you could surprise them by getting in there with a Radiant Charizard and just taking one knockout. If it's their only Pokemon, you'll win the game right there. In a similar vein, some control lists, more so the Pidgeot control lists, are playing this, but it could be an option. You could play the Paldea Evolved Luxray with a Reversal Energy. Lugia is a very bad matchup for you in this next format. They can attack with basically everything in their deck, and they play a lot of energy, so it's hard to run them out of resources. However, if they choose to just keep one Pokemon in play and attack, such as their Lugia V-Star or the Chinchino, the Luxray V, you can just slap the Reversal on there and attack with it. The downside to the Luxray V in a list like this without the Pidgeot is it's very hard to find. We're not playing any copies of Ultra Ball or anything like that. And so you would have a hard time finding it. You'd have to Seal Stone for one of the pieces. But since you can't search out either of these two pieces, the Reversal Energy or the Luxray, you would already need to have one of the pieces in your hand. So definitely more niche option, but something we could look to do. Like I was talking about before, you could play this Daisy's Help Arc Phone package, just trying to proof yourself from prizing important things. But I think that the combo's a little bit on the weaker side, so I could definitely see not including that in your lists. Something else that's rising in popularity is Crushing Hammer. Crushing Hammer just allowing you to flip a coin, and if heads, discard an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This is another way we can run our opponent out of resources. If we're getting rid of these, if there's Super Rods with our Aries and our Misfortune Sisters, then getting rid of energy can really hinder their ability to keep several attackers available to use. We can also get the Crushing Hammers back with Silene, so we have the option of playing even more than however many copies we're playing in our deck in a game. Another option that we could play in the deck is the TM Devolution. There's a couple cards in format such as the Gengar from Paradox Rift that allows you to switch your own active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon for free every turn. There's a couple Charizard lists playing that, so they have a really good stall matchup. And honestly, if Charizard gets a Gengar set up and you're not playing a TM Devo, you probably just lose on the spot. You have no way to keep something stuck in the active. And so playing a copy of TM Devolution could be an answer if we see cards like Gengar or the Decidueye EX, which does the same thing, pick up in popularity. And so you could try to like mill some candies with Aerie or Misfortune Sisters, and then hit them with the TM Devolution. And even though it gets discarded at the end of your turn, you always have the option of getting it back with that Silene. And then finally, if we're not playing the Temple of Sinnohs, another stadium we could look to play is Artisan. Like I said earlier, losing Battle VIP Pass was a big hit to this deck and its consistency in getting set up. And so just having another way in our deck to find our Snorlaxes, find, I guess, our Mimikyu 2 and maybe even the Mantine, is definitely an added bonus. Yeah, so those are some of the cards that I would maybe think about including in Snorlax Stall. And yeah, I think this deck really is in pretty good shape to have a strong spot in the meta, even stronger than it was before. I think it's on a lot of people's radars going into EUIC. Has a very good Zard matchup, a very good Qian Pao matchup. Has a poor Lugia matchup, like we were talking about before. So I guess it depends on how popular you think Lugia is going to be. But there's other decks, like the Turbo Iron Hands deck is, the way it's built right now, a very strong matchup. And I think that decks are really going to have to think about how they're constructing themselves if Snorlax Stall is going to be a big player in the early part of our Temporal Forces meta. So yeah, that's it for the video today. Let me know what you guys think about Snorlax Stall. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What other cards should we think about playing? Do we miss any like cool potential tech cards? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.